Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The sky darkened without warning. One moment, the bustling city of New York was alive with the sounds of honking cars, chattering crowds, and the constant hum of modern life. The next, an eerie silence fell over the metropolis as an unnatural shadow blotted out the sun. The world seemed to hold its breath, and then came the first screams. Dr. Emily Carter stood frozen on the steps of the New York Public Library, staring up at the sky. She had seen the reports, mysterious sightings, strange phenomena, but nothing had prepared her for this. Above her, massive ships, blacker than the darkest night, hung motionless in the air. They were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, their surfaces smooth and featureless, absorbing all light. And then, as if to confirm her worst fears, the city's power grid failed. Streetlights flickered out, electronic billboards went dark, and the cacophony of New York was replaced by a deafening silence. The alien invasion had begun. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she reached for her phone, only to find it dead in her hand. Around her, people panicked, scattering like ants as they realized the gravity of the situation. She forced herself to move, to think. As a scientist, she had to stay rational, even in the face of this unimaginable terror. Her first thought was to get to her lab, but she quickly realized that was impossible. The streets were already clogged with abandoned cars, and the subways had ground to a halt. She needed to find safety, and fast. Not far from the library, she spotted a group of people gathering near a military convoy. Soldiers were directing civilians into an underground shelter, a remnant of the Cold War, now repurposed for this new threat. Emily joined the crowd, pushing her way through the throngs of terrified people. As she descended into the shelter, the heavy doors clanged shut behind her, sealing her and hundreds of others away from the chaos above. Inside the shelter, the air was thick with fear. The crowd was a mix of tourists, office workers, and locals, all trying to make sense of what was happening. Emily's mind raced as she tried to process the situation. Who were these invaders? What did they want? And how could they be stopped? But there were no answers, only questions. The shelter was a dimly lit labyrinth of concrete walls and steel beams, a relic from another era. It was meant to protect against nuclear fallout, not an alien invasion, but it would have to do. Soldiers moved through the crowd, trying to maintain order, but it was clear they were just as frightened as the civilians they were protecting. Please, everyone, remain calm, a voice boomed over the loudspeakers. We are assessing the situation. Stay where you are, and do not panic. Emily found herself pushed up against a wall, trying to avoid the crush of bodies. Her thoughts turned to her colleagues. Were they safe? Had they managed to find shelter? She tried to imagine what they would be doing now, but the image of the dark ships hovering above the city kept intruding. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a low hum filled the air. The shelter's emergency generators had kicked in, providing a faint, flickering light. It wasn't much, but it was enough to bring a semblance of order to the chaos. People began to calm down, if only slightly, and the noise level dropped as they waited for more information. Emily spotted a familiar face in the crowd, Major Alex Reyes, a decorated military officer she had met during a security briefing at her lab. He was moving purposefully through the throng, his expression grim. Their eyes met, and he made his way over to her. Dr. Carter, he said, his voice low. I'm glad to see you made it. Major Reyes, she replied, relief flooding through her at the sight of someone she knew. What's going on out there? What are those things? Reyes shook his head. We don't know yet. Communications are down, and we're flying blind. But one thing's clear, this isn't a drill. Those ships are real, and they've knocked out the power grid across the entire city. Maybe even the entire country. Emily swallowed hard, her mind racing. What are our options? For now, we hunker down and wait for orders. The brass is trying to figure out what we're dealing with, but it's going to take time. In the meantime, we need to keep these people safe. As they spoke, the shelter's doors opened again, and more civilians poured in, guided by soldiers. Among them was a woman in her 30s, with short-cropped hair and a determined expression. She was dressed in a mechanic's jumpsuit, stained with oil and grease. "Name's Jenna Thompson," the woman said as she joined them. "I'm with the city's maintenance crew. Was on the job when all this went down." Dr. Emily Carter, Emily introduced herself. "And this is Major Reyes." "Looks like we're all in the same boat," Jenna said, glancing around at the packed shelter. "Any idea how long we'll be stuck down here?" "No idea," Reyes replied. "But it could be a while. We need to prepare for the worst." The three of them quickly formed a small team, each bringing their unique skills to the table. Emily, with her background in science and engineering, was invaluable in understanding the technology they were up against. Reyes provided the military expertise, organizing the shelter's defenses and maintaining order. Jenna, resourceful and practical, took charge of the shelter's maintenance, ensuring the generators kept running and that they had access to water and food. Days turned into weeks, and the situation above ground grew more desperate. The Drellith, as the aliens came to be known, had taken complete control of the planet's surface. Their technology was beyond anything humanity had ever encountered, rendering all attempts at resistance futile. The world had been plunged into darkness, both literally and metaphorically, but even in the darkest of times, there were sparks of hope. Emily, Reyes, and Jenna began to gather other survivors with specialized skills. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, and even ordinary citizens with a will to fight joined their cause. They formed an underground resistance, operating from the shelter's depths, planning and preparing for the day they would strike back. The first challenge was communication. With the global network down, they had no way of coordinating with other resistance groups, if any existed. But Jenna, ever resourceful, managed to cobble together a crude but effective radio transmitter using salvaged parts. It wasn't much, but it was enough to send out short-range signals, and soon they made contact with other pockets of resistance across the city. The morale boost was immediate. They were not alone. As the resistance grew, so did their ambitions. Small-scale raids on Drellith outposts became more frequent, targeting alien supply depots and communications hubs. These missions were risky and often resulted in heavy casualties, but each success, no matter how small, gave the survivors hope. One night, as they gathered around a map of the city, planning their next move, Dr. Carter had a breakthrough. "I've been studying the energy patterns of the Drellith's technology," she explained, pointing to a series of notes she had scribbled down. "Their control systems are all linked to a central hub, probably located in their mothership. If we can destroy that hub, it could disable their entire network, maybe even cripple their fleet." Reyes leaned in, studying the notes. "That's a big if, Doctor. We'd need to get inside the mothership, plant explosives at the right location, and then get out before the whole thing blows. It's a suicide mission." "Maybe," Emily admitted, "but it's our best shot. If we can pull this off, we could turn the tide of the war." Jenna, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "I'm in. I've been working on some homemade explosives that should do the trick. We just need a way to get on board that ship." The plan was audacious, bordering on madness, but it was the only chance they had. Over the next few days, the resistance prepared for the mission, gathering supplies, weapons, and volunteers. Emily and Jenna worked together to fine-tune the explosives, while Reyes organized the assault team, selecting the best fighters they had. The night before the mission, the team gathered for what might be their last meal together. The shelter was quiet, the usual buzz of activity replaced by a somber stillness. Everyone knew the risks, but they also knew the stakes. If they failed, humanity might never have another chance. Emily found herself sitting with Reyes and Jenna, the three of them lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Reyes broke the silence. "No matter what happens tomorrow, I want you both to know it's been an honor fighting alongside you." "Likewise," Jenna said, her voice steady. "We're doing the right thing. For our families, for everyone." Emily nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in her chest. She had never been a soldier, never been trained for combat, but here she was, about to risk everything for a chance to save the world. She wondered if she was ready, if any of them were, but there was no turning back now. The mission began at dawn. The team, disguised in stolen Drellith armor, made their way through the darkened city to the alien mothership, which loomed ominously above the ruins of Central Park. The air was thick with tension as they approached the ship, knowing that any mistake could mean their death. Using a combination of stealth and brute force, they infiltrated the mothership's lower levels, navigating its labyrinthine corridors. The interior was cold and sterile, lit by a harsh, unnatural light. The walls hummed with energy, a constant reminder of the alien power they were up against. As they moved deeper into the ship, they encountered Drellith soldiers, tall, imposing figures with sleek, armored bodies and emotionless faces. The resistance fighters engaged them in fierce combat, their makeshift weapons barely able to penetrate the alien armor. But they fought with everything they had, driven by the knowledge that failure was not an option. Finally, they reached the central hub, a massive chamber filled with towering columns of energy. This was the heart of the Drellith's control network, the source of their power on Earth. Emily and Jenna worked quickly, setting the explosives around the chamber while Reyes and the others held off the advancing Drellith. The tension in the room was palpable as the timer on the explosives ticked down. Emily's hands shook as she connected the final wires, knowing that they were about to gamble everything on this one desperate act. "Is it done?" Reyes called out, his voice strained with the effort of holding back the Drellith. "Almost," Emily replied, her fingers fumbling with the last connection. Just a few more seconds. Suddenly, a Drellith soldier broke through the defenses, charging toward Emily with terrifying speed. Jenna, seeing the danger, acted without hesitation. She threw herself between Emily and the alien, taking the full force of the attack. The impact sent her crashing to the ground, but not before she triggered the explosives. "Jenna!" Emily screamed, rushing to her side. But it was too late. Jenna was mortally wounded, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Go," Jenna whispered, blood staining her lips. "Finish it." Emily hesitated, torn between staying with her friend and completing the mission. But Jenna's eyes were clear, her resolve unshaken. With a final, painful nod, Emily turned and ran, following Reyes and the others out of the chamber. The explosion rocked the mothership, the shockwave tearing through the corridors as the central hub was destroyed. The Drellith soldiers faltered, their movements erratic as the ship's systems began to fail. The resistance fighters pushed forward, fighting their way to the exit as the mothership began to collapse around them. They made it out just in time, racing across Central Park as the alien ship plummeted from the sky, crashing into the earth with a deafening roar. The impact sent a shockwave through the city, toppling buildings and sending debris flying in all directions, but it was over. The mothership was destroyed, and with it, the Drelitha's hold on Earth. The survivors gathered in the park, battered and bruised, but alive. Emily stood among them, her eyes fixed on the smoking wreckage of the mothership. She could hardly believe it was over, that they had actually succeeded. But the cost had been high, too high. Jenna's sacrifice weighed heavily on her, a reminder of the price they had paid for victory. As the sun began to rise, the first light breaking through the darkness that had shrouded the world for so long, Emily felt a glimmer of hope. The Drelith were defeated, and humanity had won. But there was so much work to be done. The world was in ruins, and it would take years, maybe even decades, to rebuild. But for the first time in a long while, Emily believed they could do it. The resistance members began to organize, planning their next steps. They would need to contact other survivors, establish a new government, and start rebuilding civilization from the ground up. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but they had already proven they were capable of extraordinary things. Emily stood with Reyes, watching as the survivors started to clear the debris and tend to the wounded. The sun was fully up now, its warm light bathing the city in a golden glow. It was a new day, the first of many, and they were ready to face it. Reyes turned to her, a faint smile on his lips. "We did it, Dr. Carter." "We did," she agreed, though her voice was tinged with sadness. "But we lost so much along the way." "That's the cost of war," Reyes said quietly. "But we'll honor their memory by building a better world, one where their sacrifices weren't in vain." Emily nodded, her gaze drifting to the horizon where the sun was just beginning to rise. "Yes, we will." And with that, they turned to face the future, ready to rebuild, to restore, and to reignite the flame of human civilization. The darkness had been vanquished, and the light had returned, brighter and stronger than ever before.